Part 19. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 181. The sharpness and power of this offensive shocked the surrounding soldiers to look sideways. The extremely thick and bright electromagnetic current was so dazzling that it was almost as thick as the waistlines of two people combined. Under the high-frequency emission, the destructive power really frightened them. Not to mention them, even Wang Ling himself was a little surprised. He knew that the 7-star Ace's magnetic blast infantry was very strong, but he didn't expect it to be so strong and occupy such a favorable location. The 3 multifunctional infantry vehicles failed to advance much before they were crushed to death by himself. Wang Ling compared this level of power in his mind. He was afraid that it was much more powerful than the 1-star Rhino tank, and the electromagnetic attack's connection efficiency also increased a lot. It can be said that Wang Ling is now the human firepower is no less than 3 ordinary Rhino tanks. Even though Wang Ling had been mentally prepared for this comparison result, it was inevitable that he would be a little frightened. However, this surprise did not last long before it was broken. Behind the multifunctional infantry vehicle, 2 phantom tanks rushed forward, trying to break through here at extremely fast speeds. But Wang Ling was unceremonious. The phantom tank had just reached the foot of the mountain, and before it started climbing, Wang Ling had already launched an electromagnetic attack from a long distance away. Wang Ling himself could only target one target at a time, but after the 3-star elite, this electromagnetic attack itself had the property of connecting electricity. As a result, the 2 phantom tanks received powerful electric shocks at the same time, and the health bar above their heads decreased rapidly, and finally there was a bang. Both exploded. 3 multifunctional infantry vehicles and 2 phantom tanks were all killed by Wang Ling. The other personnel and tanks had no time to open fire. Although the armor and health of these 2 types of tanks are very weak, it is difficult for ordinary 3-star infantry to confront them head-on. What's more, Wang Ling still destroyed 5 of them alone. This achievement made the soldiers around him feel a little excited. They didn't expect that their captain would quietly become so powerful. Don't relax, the enemy army is still behind, cheer up. But Wang Ling no longer had the intention to be surprised. With 2 consecutive attacks, he gradually adapted to the enhanced electromagnetic device. As his words fell, the soldiers who were originally surprised also became serious, holding submachine guns and guarding the front. While on alert, the follow-up Grizzly tank finally arrived here. This wave of Grizzly tanks, a total of 5 of them, began to charge upwards when they reached the bottom of the hillside. And Wang Ling did the same thing. He opened fire from a long distance away. With that powerful electromagnetic attack, even 5 Grizzly tanks were enveloped in the electric light. With Wang Ling's high-frequency emission, lose blood quickly. However, after all, the Grizzly tank is not comparable to the multi-purpose infantry vehicle and the phantom tank. Its armor and health are much stronger. It was stunned by such a strong electromagnetic force and quickly charged upwards, passing halfway in less than a moment. At this time, the 5 Rhino tanks were all reduced to a state of residual health, and were about to be destroyed by Wang Ling alone. But at this time, the 3-star Apocalypse tank also opened fire. Its powerful destructive power was comparable to Wang Ling's electromagnetic attack was so powerful that the 5 Rhinoceros tanks with remaining health were enveloped in the flames of the explosion in the blink of an eye, and then exploded one after another. After all, it occupies a geographical advantage, and the range of the Apocalypse tank is also farther than usual. Wang Ling looked back at the Apocalypse tank. He was not upset that it had taken away experience. He just nodded slightly and sighed in his heart. With such destructive power, it is indeed a great weapon for the coalition forces. After 3 waves of enemy tank attacks on the main road, the leading troops from the other 2 bases finally arrived one after another. However, due to their location, they did not all choose the main road to attack. Instead, they dispersed into 3 groups and attacked the 3 passages on the mountain. Sun Dehu and others and the Hound team finally came into contact with the enemy again. Both sides were guarded by 3-star Apocalypse tanks, and their troops were very powerful, and they occupied a favorable location. The Allied offensive troops were not effective at all, and many of them were detonated without even being able to fire a single missile. Whether it is the Wolf Squad or the Hound Squad, they have been fighting hard on the battlefield and becoming stronger step by step. They even pushed down an entire Allied base just now. Although their own losses were not small, they were also greatly strengthened. Improved their morale, and the surge of 3-star elites also greatly improved the combat effectiveness and survivability of the troops. It would be quite difficult to annihilate the current Wolf team and Hound team. But the Allies seemed not to believe this evil. After the defeat of the leading troops of the three parties, large groups of soldiers finally arrived here. The three Allied forces sent out troops with a tacit understanding and sent 40 people. On the battlefield in this red alert world, this number is not considered small. The first to launch the attack were the soldiers of the blue Allied forces on the main road. After gathering at the foot of the mountain, they collectively sprinted up the long slope. Wang Ling, on the other hand, was still the same as before, launching electromagnetic attacks from a distance. This time, even though he was used to the powerful electromagnetic attack of 7-star Ace, Wang Ling was a little surprised, because this electromagnetic attack went on, and the electricity was connected quickly. A whole 10 Allied soldiers were instantly shocked by the powerful electric shock, and their blood volume increased rapidly. Decreasing. Unleveled and 1-star magnetic blast infantry can only attack individual enemies and cannot be connected. Samsung initially gained the ability to connect to electricity, but the range of the connection was very small. After the 5-star special forces, this range has been expanded a bit, and it can cover 5 or 6 consecutive enemies at once. What's great now, after 7 stars, 10 people were covered in one breath. A total of 10 people, it's like a dozen people. Wang Ling could be said to be very satisfied with this enhanced effect. Taking advantage of this momentum, he fired electromagnetic currents one after another, covering large areas of Allied soldiers. After several consecutive rounds, 10 people were electrocuted to death. Although it is not as powerful as the magnetic storm coil, Wang Ling is much better than the magnetic storm coil in terms of troop clearing efficiency. The others watched the scene helplessly, their eyelids couldn't help but twitch a few times. Is this cheap captain already so strong? Go on, hit me. Wang Ling had no intention of paying attention to other people's gazes. After realizing the power of the 7-star Ace, Wang Ling became more willing to fight. With a cry, he continued to launch electromagnetic attacks at the other 10 people, attacking large areas of enemy troops. Being hit by the electric current, his body froze, and then he fell to the ground in an exaggerated manner. No matter how the blood bar above his head continued to decline, he could not touch Wang Ling at all. He could only grit his teeth and hold his heart, passively withstanding this strong current. Attack. And after several shots in succession, all the unwillingness and fear can only disappear with the current. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 182. Half of this group of enemy infantry had been wiped out by Wang Ling alone before they could fire. This result made this group of Allied soldiers feel a little heavy in their hearts. However, the military orders were overwhelming, and no matter how scared they were, they had no intention of retreating and were still charging without fear of death. At the cost of the death of half of the soldiers, this group of Allied soldiers finally succeeded in rushing forward and came into contact with the firepower of other members of the Wolf Squad. However, instead of ending, this nightmare began to intensify. The 3-star Apocalypse tanks, 3-star anti-aircraft crawlers, and all the 3-star conscripts deployed in front of them all opened fire. Wang Ling also subsequently launched an electromagnetic attack, covering a large area of Allied soldiers. Within this range, the Allied soldiers finally had the ability to fight back, and they deployed one after another in an attempt to fight back. However, they obviously underestimated the current power of the Wolf Squad. Not to mention that Wang Ling could cover 10 Allied soldiers alone, and the firepower of the Apocalypse tanks, tracked vehicles, and 3-star conscripts were not just decorations. As a result, these remaining the Allied soldiers were completely wiped out before they could fire for long. At this point, all the encirclement and suppression troops dispatched by the Blue Allied base have been wiped out. This achievement made Wang Ling feel happy for a while. The enhanced attack ability of the 7-star Queen made him full of fighting spirit. According to this posture, the Allied troops will swallow as many as they come. Wang Ling was not a saint. He was holding an enhanced electromagnetic device, and based on this achievement, he began to feel a little proud. Swish. However, just as he finished speaking, he suddenly heard the sound of time and space fluctuations coming from behind the team. His heart tightened, and when he looked back, it turned out to be 2 soldiers of the Time and Space Legion, holding neutron rifles, attacking 2 people. The soldiers with residual blood in the rear, beside the 2 people, still had 2 traces of time and space fluctuations. It was obvious that 2 of them had suffered. Wang Ling likes to call this kind of chronospace legionnaires as chronospace warriors. They are a type of unit that he is quite coveted. Not long ago, he wanted to occupy the Allied command post mainly to experience this type of unit. Chrono legionnaires rarely move their feet at ordinary times. They all move through time and space. They can all reach any corner on the battlefield through time and space movement in an instant. However, after arriving, they are unable to move for a period of time. As for the duration, it is also directly proportional to the distance moved. Its attack method is also very unique. It uses a neutron rifle to fire hyperspace light waves. Any target hit will lose all mobility, unable to move or attack. After a period of time, it will be completely erased from this space. This time is directly proportional to the life, blood volume, and strength of the target being attacked. However, there are no perfect units in this game, and the Chrono Legionnaires are no exception. In addition to being unable to move for a period of time after moving long distances, they also have this problem when attacking. They can only use neutron guns to target the enemy, they cannot act until the enemy is eliminated. During this period, they are simply living targets. Although it is possible to change the target and attack other enemies, once the current target is abandoned, all previous efforts will be wasted and the target will regain its ability to move and combat effectiveness. As for the current situation, it was obvious that these 2 Chrono Legion soldiers secretly moved here while the Wolf Squad was focusing on firing. Using the frontal battlefield as a cover, Wang Ling failed to notice them. Looking at the 2 traces of time-space fluctuations next to them, it is obvious that 2 seriously injured members of the Wolf team have been poisoned by them. You humming grandma is looking for death. This scene made Wang Ling so angry that he immediately changed his target and launched a powerful electromagnetic attack at the 2 Chrono Legion soldiers. Although Wang Ling's electromagnetic attack now has a terrifying ability to connect electricity, this ability obviously will not be directed at his own troops. Only the 2 Chrono Legion soldiers were attacked. After the others noticed Wang Ling's target, they quickly turned around. After discovering the target, they moved their position urgently. After reaching the fire range, they opened fire without hesitation, killing the 2 supermen almost instantly. Space-Time Legionnaire. The 2 seriously injured soldiers who had been controlled also returned to normal at this time. Although they couldn't do anything when they were controlled, they seemed to have their own consciousness. Their faces were all ugly now, and they were very scared in their hearts. After finally rescuing the 2 of them, Wang Ling breathed a sigh of relief, and then shouted as if he was worried, "Everyone, please pay attention to your rear, don't be attacked by the soldiers of the Super Dimension Legion. This battlefield is quite large, and the 3 intersections are far apart. Wang Ling even used radio to notify the troops at other intersections. Other intersections are now facing attacks from large groups of enemy soldiers, and all have suffered some damage under the fierce attack. However, the firepower of the garrison troops at the two intersections is no joke. There is a 3-star killer weapon at each intersection. The 3-star Apocalypse tank can fire 4 explosive shells in one breath. This kind of shells has the power to kill ordinary ground infantry almost instantaneously. Moreover, when the 3-star Apocalypse tank deals with enemy ground infantry, the gun barrel almost instantly fires. It stood still and swayed, and each shell almost killed an enemy infantry. However, after 3 rounds, its firing frequency was extremely high. When connected together, it was like strafing. Ordinary infantrymen have no way to deal with the 3-star Apocalypse tanks, and the human sea tactic will not work unless the number of people is so huge that even the Apocalypse tanks cannot kill them in a short time. As for the current attack, the enemy soldiers were obviously far from reaching this level. As a result, under the strafe of Apocalypse's artillery shells and in conjunction with the firepower of other infantry, all the enemy troops who came to encircle and suppress them was annihilated after some time. At this point, the encirclement and suppression troops of the 3 enemy forces have all been wiped out. However, for these 2 teams that defeated an entire Allied base, the other 3 Allied forces obviously did not intend to let go. This round of encirclement and suppression had just ended, and the next round had already begun, and the number of soldiers and tanks there were more than before. At the same time, 2 invader fighter planes rushed out of all the 3 bases and flew over menacingly. Although the presence of fighter jets was greatly weakened in the game, Wang Ling had to pay attention to them now and quickly ordered the anti-aircraft crawlers to be placed in front. However, there was only one Samsung tracked vehicle at this intersection, and it was impossible to keep all the invader fighters in a short period of time. As a result, 6 fighters came with artillery fire, and all 6 missiles were thrown at the Apocalypse tank. The Apocalypse tank was also moving quickly to avoid missile attacks, but in the end it only managed to dodge 2 shots, while the other 4 shots all hit. This incomplete HP was severely injured in an instant. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 183. As the explosions of the 4 missiles came out, there was a buzz in Wang Ling's head and a severe tug in his heart. Although Wang Ling values soldiers more than tanks and often uses tanks as shields to attack, this does not mean that he does not care about tanks, especially tanks that have reached the elite level. Each of them he is the treasure of the Wolf team, and he will feel sad for a long time if one of them is scrapped. What's more, this car has already reached the level of the 3-star elite's big killer, the Apocalypse tank. However, as the smoke and dust dissipated, Wang Ling finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the Apocalypse tank had not been directly exploded, but was only seriously injured and bleeding. The 3-star Apocalypse tank has a very strong self-healing ability. If you give it a certain amount of time, it can always recover to full health. However, this premise requires sufficient time. In its current state, it is afraid that it will explode if it cannot withstand too many attacks. However, the 3-party encirclement and suppression forces of the Allied forces have come out, and there is not much time to recover at all. What's more, there are those invader fighter planes that are eyeing him. No, we can't keep fighting like this. Wang Ling gritted his teeth and already had the intention to retreat, but he still had some scruples in his heart. Captain Wang. At this time, Sun Chiming, who was originally guarding a small road, suddenly ran over and said anxiously, "Captain Wang, we can't go on like this. This place is too close to the 3 Allied bases. They can send troops at any time. The battle has just ended, and my subordinates suffered heavy casualties and cannot withstand too much impact. The remaining combat power of the Hound team was very low, and it was even less able to fight for a long time than the Wolf team. Sun Chiming was now at his wits' end, so he came to Wang Ling for help. Wang Ling also gritted his teeth and looked at the enemy's momentum from the electronic map. Then he sighed and shook his head. I also want to retreat, but it's difficult. Fighting while retreating won't give us any advantage. It is easy to be caught up and hit head-on. At least here we still occupy a favorable location, waiting for work, and can persist longer. Sun Chiming rubbed his head again habitually, but this time because of his anxiety, he felt quite ravaged, but this is not a solution. Our manpower will only become less and less, and there is no way to replenish it. It's a bit of a trapped beast fight. There's nothing we can do, but if we worry again, what's the use? Is it possible that we can still be okay? Wang Ling was also a little impatient and couldn't help but tone his voice a little louder. However, before he finished speaking, he suddenly checked from the electronic map that a large number of troops were dispatched from the two coalition bases at the same time. The troops seemed to be planning to rush to help. After zooming in on the electronic map and checking the video, Wang Ling discovered that the team dispatched from his base was actually the Eagle Squadron. Wang Ling didn't know much about the team dispatched from the other base, but looking at the lineup, it was no weaker than the previous Hound team. After noticing this scene, Wang Ling's face was filled with joy and he smiled. Haha, Captain Sun, we have a solution, the base has sent reinforcements. After being reminded by Wang Ling, Sun Chiming hurriedly checked the electronic map. After discovering this situation, he suddenly showed an ecstatic expression. Great! Ha ha ha, let me just say, we fought hard here, how could the base abandon us? I really love these reinforcements. After Wang Ling laughed, he said seriously, however, don't get too happy so early. The problem has not been solved yet. There are reinforcements, but it is impossible to let them come here. It will just be more troops being besieged. Sun Chiming also returned to his normal state and took a long breath and said, yes, it is time for us to retreat. Although it is not good for us to retreat and fight at the same time in this state, it can be done like this. As long as we cross the two bridges and follow the reinforcements, let's get together, these bastards can't do anything to us. Without further delay, hurry up and take action. Good. After a brief negotiation, the captains of the two teams quickly issued the order. There were many seriously injured people in the two teams and they couldn't afford to run away. Wang Ling simply let them ride on the anti-aircraft crawler vehicles and rush back to the base first. All the crawlers of the Hound team were destroyed, but fortunately, when the base dispatched engineers, an extra one came and was temporarily mobilized to carry the 4 seriously injured members of the Hound team, plus an engineer, along with the other 2 tracked vehicles. We rushed back together. Although many of the remaining personnel were not full of health, at least they still had a lot of combat effectiveness. After seeing off the 3 anti-aircraft crawler vehicles, Wang Ling waved his hand and led the team, together with the remaining personnel of the Hound team, he quickly retreated from the side path. The movement of large troops cannot be fast. The running speed of conscripts is far less than that of tanks. However, Wang Ling just let the seriously injured tanks clear the way in advance, and other tanks with more health followed the soldiers. Acting as a temporary shield. Allied forces have spy satellites, which are more efficient than coalition radars. They can open up the line of sight and view the entire map from the electronic map without exploring. The retreat of the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad was naturally not concealed from satellite monitoring. Naturally, the Allies also noticed that the multifunctional infantry vehicles of the vanguard immediately took the lead in changing direction and followed the 2 squads in pursuit. The 2 teams were marching slowly because of the speed of the mobilization troops, and the speed of the multifunctional infantry vehicles was not inferior to that of the anti-aircraft tracked vehicles. After a slow and fast pace, they were finally overtaken by the infantry vehicles. After losing the geographical advantage, the defense of the two teams was somewhat passive. More than a dozen multifunctional infantry vehicles from the three bases came forward and opened fire on the half-health Apocalypse tank. After being attacked, those tanks, as well as Wang Ling, Sun Chiming, Sun Dehua, Li Tong, Gu Suanwu and others all stopped and turned around to greet them. Although there were a large number of multifunctional infantry vehicles, after all, their armor and health were too fragile, and they were all swept away without being able to destroy much of the HP of the Apocalypse tanks. After destroying the enemy with a backhand, these personnel and tanks did not dare to stay at all. They turned around and retreated quickly. They soon caught up with the large army, urging them to speed up. In fact, without his urging, all the mobilization troops had already exerted all their strength, and the speed had reached their limit. After all, there are too many pursuers from the Allied forces in the rear, and there are tanks that are much faster than the soldiers. Once they fall, they will only die. Now, the two teams are really facing a life and death situation. If they want to survive, they can only go faster, and even faster. As long as they join the reinforcements, all the problems can be solved, and everyone can still survive. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 184. Quick, faster. The troops' retreat speed had almost reached its limit, but Wang Ling was still urging, and his voice fell on the ears of other soldiers, like a reminder. At that moment, they all tried their best to squeeze out their physical energy and accelerate as fast as they could. The original Yellow Allied base was not too far away from the river in the middle of the battlefield, so the Hound team originally selected it as the target of attack. Now that we have successfully captured it, when we retreat, we will naturally not be too far away from the river and bridge. Of course, this distance is also relative. After all, the map is too big. Even at the speed of infantry, this distance will take a long time to cross. During this period, Wang Ling had been observing the movements of the pursuers on the electronic map. Under his observation, it can be found that after the multifunctional infantry vehicle was defeated, the remaining pursuit teams were divided into several speed levels as a whole. At the forefront are 6 Phantom tanks, which came from the 3 bases but gathered halfway. They are now lined up in a long snake, getting closer and closer to the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad at a relatively fast speed. Behind the Phantom tank, there are nearly 20 Grizzly tanks gathered from the 3 Allied bases. Of course, this kind of tank is not as good as a Rhino tank in a duel. In front of a 3-star Rhino tank or an Apocalypse tank, it will basically be killed instantly. However, quantitative changes lead to qualitative changes. A group of Grizzly tanks, even a full-status 3-star Apocalypse tank, can't do anything about it. Resist. And behind the Grizzly tanks, 3 light tanks of different colors were chasing after them. This time, in order to destroy the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad, the Allied base was really determined. Invader fighter planes and light tanks were dispatched. As for the rear of the light tank, there is naturally a large force of Allied soldiers. The soldiers from the 3 Allied bases gathered together, and the momentum was quite astonishing. Looking at the electronic map, what was displayed was a large area of light dots flashing in 3 colors. The number was probably more than 150 people. After all, games are different from reality. In this game, the number of soldiers in each base is not too many. Although this basic number has been increased in Red Alert World, the number of people in a team is also very limited. After accommodating the Bird Squad like the Wolf Squad, there are only about 70 people, which is already quite a large scale, let alone the team of more than 150 people put together by the 3-party Allied base. This number in this battlefield is quite amazing. An infantry team of more than 150 people, plus 3 Prism tanks, nearly 20 Grizzly tanks, 6 Phantom tanks, plus more than a dozen multi-purpose infantry vehicles that were destroyed before. This lineup, it can be said to be luxurious. Even if it attacks a coalition base, even if it fails to defeat it, it will be severely beaten and may even be seriously injured or even disabled. However, a force of this size is now only used to encircle and suppress the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad. It can be seen how much the Allies fear and hate these two squads. Compared with the Allied forces, the coalition forces are very happy. These two teams have attracted enough attention from them, and they must save them no matter what. Da-da-da. Buzz buzz. On the battlefield, the teams of the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad were still running desperately, and the footsteps were quite chaotic. Everyone was trying their best to suppress their potential in order to survive. They were not too far from the river in the middle line of the battlefield. After such a desperate run, they finally gradually approached the river. However, instead of being happy, Wang Ling's face gradually became gloomy. Because he discovered from the electronic map that the 6 phantom tanks of the second echelon of the Allied encirclement and suppression troops were getting closer and closer to them at this time. According to this trend, he was afraid that the troops would not be able to cross the river at all and would have to be chased by them. Superior. Wang Ling attaches great importance to these phantom tanks. Although there are not too many in number, their lethality against infantry and tanks is really troublesome. If they are allowed to fight, it is estimated that these two teams of tanks acting as shields will not be able to fight at all. Can't stop them. Not to mention the loss of the tank itself, it is enough to make Wang Ling feel distressed. Once the shield is broken, the team will lose its protection. If the phantom tank is attacked by then, the number of people in the entire team who can survive is probably very small. With this concern and hidden danger, Wang Ling couldn't calm down and continue to move forward. He simply gritted his teeth and made a temporary decision: all of you, continue to speed up the retreat for me. The 2 Apocalypse tanks and Rhino tanks will stay with me. These 3 tanks already have insufficient health, and there is even an Apocalypse tank with only 1/3 of its health remaining. But at present, the 2 teams can only bring out these tanks. Wang Ling stayed alone with these tanks. Naturally, he wanted to deal with those phantom tanks later. Others also knew it well, and many people protested at the moment. No, Captain, we have to stay together. We will never escape on our own. Captain, don't look down on us, we can still continue to fight. We want to stay too. All the members of the Wolf Squad were furious, and even Sun Chiming was shouting, Captain Wang, we are all captains, why do you want to cut off the rear and ask me to escape? I don't accept it, and I want to stay together. The eyes of this group of people showed perseverance and their faces showed stubbornness, as if they would not run away even if Wang Ling wanted to stay. Watching this scene, Wang Ling felt a warm feeling in his heart. It was not a loss to stay and fight the enemy for these comrades. But is this all humming against me? Suppressing the warmth in his heart, Wang Ling showed an angry look and cursed unceremoniously, you stay here and seek death? Who can shoot farther than me? Don't waste your time here. Time, everyone, get out of here, non-stop. Others wanted to continue protesting, but Wang Ling's attitude also frightened them. How had they ever seen Wang Ling swear like this before? They looked like wolves and tigers, with no intention of negotiating at all, and there was even a tendency that they would be beaten if they disobeyed. Knowing that Wang Ling was stubborn and unable to persuade him, Sun Dehe gritted his teeth, waved his hand, and continued to run forward with the team. Sun Chiming was also shocked by Wang Ling's attitude, and finally chose to believe Wang Ling. However, before leaving, he told him, Captain Wang, don't let your mother die here. After the solution is solved, follow us quickly. The 2 of you haven't had a drink yet. After saying that, Sun Chiming finally turned his head and continued to chase him. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 185. TCH. You said it so decisively, do you think I will really die? Looking at their walking backs, Wang Ling curled his lips and complained. Although it does seem crazy to be willing to stay in person to break up the relationship, Wang Ling has no intention of revealing himself here. After all, if you die here, you will die in reality. Wang Ling hasn't lived enough yet. After the group of soldiers ran out of sight, Wang Ling waved his hand and lined up the three tanks, almost touching each other. Wang Ling retreated a little alone and followed the three tanks. The tanks kept some distance. Although the current situation is indeed too difficult for the Wolf Squad and the Dog Squad, it is not completely hopeless, and this hope lies in Wang Ling. After he set up the formation, the 6 phantom tanks lined up in a long snake finally approached the place menacingly. At this time, Wang Ling also raised his heart and concentrated his energy as never before, staring at the phantom tank at the end of his sight. After the phantom tank entered the shooting range, Wang Ling gritted his teeth and launched a thick and brilliant electromagnetic current from a distance. After contacting the first phantom tank, it fired towards the second one, once the attack directly covered 2 phantoms. This is due to the somewhat different timing of dispatching troops from the 3 allied bases, which allows these 6 phantom tanks to be separated by some distance from each other. Otherwise, more tanks will be covered. When the first 2 phantom tanks were attacked, the health bar above their heads immediately shrunk by part. However, one attack was far from enough to destroy them. Instead, it attracted their attention and aimed all their hatred and crosshairs at Wang Ling. However, their range could not reach Wang Ling at all. They could only change their targets and try to rush into their fire range to attack Wang Ling. During this process, Wang Ling rarely became nervous, his heart was pounding so hard, and he even had some cold sweat streaming from his temples. After all, when the phantom tank really gets close to its fire range, he will explain the damage caused by the phantom to the infantry. However, the worst-case scenario did not occur after all. The phantom tank charged forward and failed to reach Wang Ling at all. However, it had already entered the attack range of the 3 Apocalypse tanks and Rhino tanks. Now it was about to usher in. It fired 10 explosive shells. With the armor and life of the phantom tank, it was simply unable to withstand such an attack, and it was blown up in an instant. Then, the second welcome followed suit and was bombarded into a pile of debris, flying all over the sky. Seeing the debris falling to the ground, Wang Ling finally breathed a sigh of relief and wiped the sweat from his temples. I won the bet. It seems that my life should not be cut off. That's right, Wang Ling was betting on the range of the 7-star Ace Magnetic Blast Infantry. After being promoted to the 7-star Ace, the greatly extended shooting distance was enough for Wang Ling to be in a relatively safe area, using the distance advantage to attract hatred, and then leave it to the Apocalypse tank and Rhino tank to deal with it. Although he was very confident in his heart, Wang Ling was still muttering and scared when he actually did it. After all, this was a gamble with his life, and he couldn't afford to lose. However, in the end, he still won the bet, and his shooting range could indeed ensure his safety. Although the range of the original magnetic blast infantry of the 3-star elite would be extended, it was far from enough to deal with the current situation. His promotion to the 7-star Ace some time ago was of great help to Wang Ling. Admittedly, this kind of response is somewhat suspected of cheating, but who makes Wang Ling a player himself? In this red alert world, there are naturally some special treatments, just like the halo of the protagonist. Without this halo, a protagonist who is invisible to everyone and has no outstanding features would have any story value. If you dare to come and encircle us, you will never come back. Once the experiment was successful, Wang Ling felt confident, and his eyes also exuded a fierce light. Although the 6 phantom tanks were separated by some distance, they were not too far away. After the first 2 exploded, the middle 2 and the last 2 arrived here not long after. Wang Ling also followed the same old tactics, attracting firepower and then handed it over to the tanks to deal with it. The 6 phantom tanks that were enough to threaten the safety of their entire team were finally killed by him. Looking at the disappearing wreckage, the electromagnetic device on Wang Ling's right hand flashed slightly again, and there seemed to be an electromagnetic current of huge energy hidden in it. The corners of his mouth turned up slightly, showing the slight satisfaction in his heart. However, the situation on the battlefield was still very unfavorable to them. Wang Ling did not hesitate for too long and waved his hand, "Keep running and retreat." After resisting the phantom tanks, they had already put a long distance away from the main force. But this is obviously not a problem for Wang Ling. After undergoing intermediate physical strengthening, Wang Ling's running speed is far beyond those of those people. Before, he was only taking care of them and did not let go at full speed. Now he happened to be chasing a large army, so Wang Ling no longer restricted his speed and started running wildly with the tanks. Under normal circumstances, the running speed of the conscripts is not as fast as the driving speed of the Apocalypse tank, and the Apocalypse tank is not as fast as the driving speed of the Rhino tank. But nothing is absolute, and Wang Ling is an exception. Running at full speed, he is actually a few minutes faster than the Rhino tank. The distance he had originally opened with the large army was suddenly shortened by him, and he was ahead of the tank. Rhino tanks gave chase. The large army was still retreating desperately, but Wang Ling stayed behind for them after all. While retreating, they were also paying attention to the electronic map. Of course, they also saw the process of Wang Ling's design to blow up those phantom tanks. Now that Wang Ling has arrived, Sun Dehu and others started to flatter him after greeting him, "You're so awesome, you deserve to be the captain of our wolf team." Even Sun Chiming also praised, "Captain Wang, I admire you. I owe you a lot of life during this period of time, haha." However, Wang Ling cursed angrily, "Grandma, let you concentrate on retreating. Do you still have time to watch the battle? Do you still think the enemy is not pursuing closely enough?" The flattery slapped the horse's leg, and the kick made them all feel a little resentful. They simply stopped talking and concentrated on running. Behind them, the Rhino tank quickly caught up after letting up its speed. Even the 2 Apocalypse tanks arrived soon after, and then continued to follow the team in accordance with the original order, acting as a guard. Shield. As for the Allied forces, they had been annihilated by 2 rounds of offensive troops one after another, and still showed no intention of retreating. The Grizzly tanks of the 3rd echelon were still charging menacingly, and they were seeing the distance between them and the Wolf squad and the Hound squad getting closer and closer. The shorter it gets, I'm afraid it will be another big battle when we catch up. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 186. On the devastated land, deep pits caused by the war can be seen everywhere. On the surrounding mountains, many trees have been forcibly erased due to certain wartime needs. Looking around, there are bare mountain peaks everywhere, and the sky is filled with the strong smell of gunpowder seem to indicate the fierceness and ruthlessness of this battlefield. On the side of the mountain range, 2 teams composed of infantry and tanks passed quickly without any intention of stopping to admire the scenery. They ran with all their strength and soon rushed out of the mountain area and stepped into an open area. Plain. Not long after they rushed through, an army of tanks composed of 3 color camps also rushed through quickly, kicking up smoke and dust along the way. Behind them, there are also 3 tanks composed of 3 color camps, and there are even a large number of troops chasing after them in the rear. This scene is naturally a scene where the Wolf squad and the Hound squad are desperately retreating, while the 3 allied forces are desperately chasing. After annihilating the multifunctional infantry vehicle and the Phantom tank, The situation of the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad was still worrying. There were too many troops tracking behind them, and it was difficult for them to resist with their current lineup. Hurry, hurry up, the enemy is getting closer. During the retreat, Wang Ling was still urging them from time to time. Although all the mobilization soldiers were already running with all their strength, in his eyes, it was still too slow. After running for a long time, the rushing river finally came into view in front of them. When they heard the sound of the surging water, all the people in the two teams were refreshed. This river evenly divides the entire battlefield. Across the bridge, the other side is the territory of the coalition forces. During this period of time, the three allied forces chased them so awkwardly that everyone was holding back some fear and anger. Moreover, after running for such a long time, many people in the team had begun to overdraw their physical fitness. From time to time, someone will fall down, then continue to grit their teeth, stand up, and run wildly for survival. After seeing the river, everyone was very excited. Buzz buzz. Buzz buzz. However, before they could be excited for too long, they were awakened by the sound of a large number of engines coming from behind. The army of grizzly tanks that followed were already within their sight, and they would be there soon. Caught up with them. Don't be stunned, hurry up and cross the bridge. Wang Ling waved his hand and urged many people and tanks. His body has been strengthened at an intermediate level, and his physical strength is far beyond that of ordinary people. He has been pressing the speed all the time. Even after running around for so long, he doesn't feel much tired. When the others heard this, they gritted their teeth, used all their strength, and continued running as hard as they could. The bridge was simply wide enough for all of them to rush up, but it didn't seem crowded. The two teams quickly successfully crossed the bridge. But at this time, those grizzly tanks had already caught up with them and were about to bite their tails. But after crossing the bridge, Wang Ling changed his previous nervousness. A trace of madness flashed in the corner of his eyes, and he shouted hysterically, "Apocalypse tank, blow up the bridge for me." The two Apocalypse tanks were already at the rear of the team. After hearing the order, they immediately turned their gun barrels and poured out a large number of explosive shells. The bridge could not withstand such bombings and was completely blown up in almost a breath. Break. At this time, those grizzly tanks really caught up with them. However, they seemed to be a little late. The bridge was blown up, and below was the rapid river. Grizzly tanks could not cross the river at all. They crowded around the broken bridge in groups, and it seemed that they were quite strong. Hurry. When other people saw this scene, many of them secretly gave Wang Ling a thumbs up. This move was quite devastating. The troops dispatched by the Allied forces only wanted to encircle and suppress the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad, and they were all ground troops. They could not cross the river, and there were no engineers to follow, so they could not repair the bridge. Now that the bridge was broken, it disrupted the originally aggressive pursuit of the Allied troops. The army's position. Looking at the stacked grizzly tanks, it seems that they really want to fly over and have a battle with the Wolf team and the Hound team. But where can they fly? Ha ha ha, chase, keep chasing. Didn't you chase pretty fiercely before? Hey, you can't swim anymore. If you can't swim, you can fly. You can fly here and beat me. After being chased for so long, the personnel of both teams were all simmering with anger. Now that they were blocking the Allied forces' path, they finally had time. They panted and turned around to taunt. It seemed that these taunts made the other side angry. After wandering around for a while, these grizzly tanks collectively withdrew from the broken bridge area and scurried away to one side. Not only these grizzly tanks, but also the prism tanks and the army of Allied soldiers in the rear also changed directions at the same time. Looking at the direction they were heading from the electronic map, Wang Ling's eyes were fixed. On this battlefield, evenly divided by the river, there are only two bridges that can connect the two sides. Wang Ling just let the apocalypse tank blow up one of them, but there is another bridge. These damn allied troops are really determined to destroy us. Wang Ling gritted his teeth, feeling a little angry in his heart. The two bridges are not too far apart from each other, but this is only relative. The battlefield area is too large after all. A short distance on the map is enough for this group of allies to run around for a while. After running around and crossing the bridge, it would take twice as long for this group of troops to catch up with the Wolf team and the Hound team. During this period of time, Wang Ling and the others were safer. Thinking of this, Wang Ling also breathed a sigh of relief, and quickly ordered, "Hurry up, everyone rest in place for 5 minutes, and continue to retreat after 5 minutes." After everyone heard this, they hurriedly sat down as if they had been forgiven. Some people even lay directly on the ground, breathing hard. After running for so long, they were indeed exhausted. They were also very clear about the situation on the battlefield. They could also see the movements of the Allied pursuers from the electronic map. Although they had crossed the bridge and reached the area of influence belonging to the Allied forces, there was this group of unyielding pursuers. Army, they are not absolutely safe, and they still cherish these 5 minutes of rest time. Compared to them, Wang Ling still had a lot of energy left, so he was not in a hurry to rest. Instead, he walked around the team and looked around, while also observing the enemy's movements in his mind. Seeing that Wang Ling was still working tirelessly, the soldiers who were almost exhausted all showed some expressions of admiration. This captain is really a monster. After running for so long, he still has such sufficient physical energy. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 187. Strictly speaking, it is not wrong to say that Wang Ling is a monster. After all, after intermediate strengthening, his current physical fitness is indeed much more abnormal than that of ordinary people. In the eyes of those people, he is naturally a monster. However, Wang Ling was not satisfied yet. After seeing the effect of intermediate enhancement, Wang Ling has already set his sights on high-level enhancement. The intermediate enhancement is already so powerful, what about after the advanced enhancement? I am afraid that at that time, Wang Ling would really have become a monster-level existence. Naturally, it is too far away to think about these things now, so let's get through the current crisis first. After observing in his mind that the pursuing Allied troops were still quite a distance away from them, Wang Ling felt more relieved and simply followed the others and sat down to rest. Although he doesn't feel very tired now, if he can rest, why not? After all, the rest time was only 5 minutes. In this situation, the 5 minutes passed almost instantly. Many soldiers did not feel that they had rested for long. Wang Ling had already shouted, "The time is up, continue retreat." In the current team, after running so desperately for a long time, many people feel exhausted. 5 minutes is not enough to make up for the loss of physical strength. After hearing the order, most of these people stood up in pain. Face. However, this is a battlefield and there is no room for their willfulness. If they don't want to hurry up and retreat, they can only wait to die. Fortunately, after these 5 minutes of rest, the soldiers also recovered some physical fitness. They stood up without delay and continued running towards the base. Although they have not yet gotten rid of the pursuers and there is still a threat, after crossing the bridge, the team's sense of urgency is obviously not as exaggerated as before. After many soldiers and tanks have been driving continuously for a long time, they observe on the electronic map that there is not much ahead. In the distance, there were the reinforcements that the two teams had gathered together in advance. This discovery also refreshed the spirits of the soldiers in the team, and then they involuntarily speeded up a bit, and the reinforcements were always moving closer to them. As they walked towards each other, the two sides finally met smoothly not long after. It was already late at night, but the moonlight was shining brightly tonight. As soldiers who had been on the battlefield for a long time, it was obviously not difficult to see things clearly in this night. When the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad stood in front of the reinforcements, the two reinforcements were lined up majestically, with two people standing at the front, clearly identifying their captains. After seeing Wang Ling and the others, the two men performed military salutes one after another and shouted in turn. Eagle Squad, Chen Tong. Team Firefox, Dongming. Wang Ling saw their formation and glanced at each other face to face with sun chiming. He did not lose his momentum. After the military salute, he also shouted. Wolf Squad, Wang Ling. Hound Squad, Sun chiming. After the four people reported their reports, the serious atmosphere at the scene was broken. The first person to speak was Dongming, the captain of the Firefox team. He looked at Sun chiming and Wang Ling and said with a smile, "Okay, Captain Sun, Wang Captain, I really didn't expect that you actually destroyed an allied base." Sun chiming chuckled and started boasting, "That's right. It doesn't matter who we are. If the hunting team is dispatched, there will always be good things for the enemy to eat." Dongming also unceremoniously broke down the situation, "Pull you down. If Captain Wang hadn't come to support, your Hound team would have retreated long ago, let alone push the allied base." When this point was pointed out, Sun chiming couldn't help but smile in shame and refused to comment. Quan took it as acquiescence. And Chen Tong did not hesitate to praise Wang Ling, and said with a smile, "Captain Wang Ling, it is not unfair for me to come to visit you specially. What the Wolf team did is really beautiful." Wang Ling was too lazy to brag. He spread his hands and made it clear, "Let's not talk about that for now. We pushed an allied base, which seemed to have shocked the allied forces. Troops were sent to those three allied bases one after another. Now there is a tail following behind. Chen Tong and the others are naturally aware of this situation, otherwise why would they come to help?" Looking at the enemy troops on the electronic map that had bypassed the broken bridge and were approaching here, Chen Tong smiled very confidently, "Since there is a tail, let's chop it off." The Eagle Squadron listened to the order and entered a state of combat readiness. All the invading enemy troops will be wiped out without a single one left. Cross. Kaka kaka. Following Chen Tong's order, the Eagle team members who were waiting behind him immediately took a step forward, then picked up their submachine guns, and all types of tanks were also in position. The formation was quite powerful. After Wang Ling saw it, he nodded silently. This team did not disgrace the name of the Eagle Squad. After him, the Firefox Squad also issued corresponding orders, and all the two supporting army units entered a state of combat readiness, waiting for the enemy to approach. Seeing this battle formation, Wang Ling's blood boiled with excitement. He turned around and asked the members of the Wolf team, "Brothers, the enemy has been chasing us for so long. Do you want revenge? Can you continue to fight?" "I think I can." The entire Wolf Squad shouted, and the momentum was no worse than that of the Eagle Squad and the Firefox Squad. Sun chiming also laughed, turned to his remaining subordinates and shouted, "Brothers, we can't weaken our momentum. Escape. Retreat. Of course, we used too much energy when we retreated. But when it comes to beating up the Allies, our physical strength is inexhaustible. We beat them into grandsons before, and they have been chasing us like grandsons for so long, so let's show them now, who is the real grandson." This guy's mobilization was a bit different. After he finished speaking, the people in the Hound team couldn't help but laugh. However, after laughing, they were all aroused with high fighting spirit. However, someone came up to trouble him, such as Dongming, "Grandson, grandson, where did you get so many grandsons? You're everywhere, just wait and see." Sun chiming was startled, and then he yelled back. The two of them seemed to quarrel frequently, and they had long been used to each other. Dongming just laughed and was not angry. Now that he has joined the reinforcements, with the surge in troops and firepower, it will be much easier to destroy the remaining pursuers. Wang Ling simply asked the wounded to retreat to the rear, with the soldiers who were full of health in front. As many as possible to keep the team alive. As for the tanks in the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad now don't have much health, so they are not placed at the front. They just put the reinforcement tanks slightly behind to maintain output, but refuse to attract firepower. After the four teams were in position, the Grizzly tank group of the 3rd Speed Echelon of the Allied pursuers finally caught up here. A big battle was about to break out. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 188. After all, it was a long journey, and the nearly 20 Grizzly tanks were not piled up together, but instead arranged in groups of 2s and 3s. Now, the 3 Grizzly tanks at the front have entered Wang Ling's shooting range. Wang Ling no longer waited and launched a thick and brilliant electromagnetic attack from a distance, touching the Grizzly. The tank, with the power connected, completely covered the 3 tanks in front, and the health bar above its head was rapidly decreasing. That's not all. Wang Ling's current attack frequency is quite high. After one attack, there will be a second and third attack, and the health bars on the heads of the 3 Grizzly tanks will decrease at a faster rate. But in this position, Wang Ling no longer has the advantage, and the range is not as good as when he was on the high mountain. The 3 Grizzly tanks withstood Wang Ling's bombardment and completely touched the coalition's fire circle at the cost of residual health. The Apocalypse tank of the Eagle Squadron at the front opened fire without hesitation. Although the speed was not fast, it destroyed one of the Grizzly tanks before Wang Ling, while the other 2 were subsequently exploded by Wang Ling. Although they had seen the power of Wang Ling's electromagnetic attack on the map video before, Chen Tong, Dongming and others were also surprised when they saw it up close. This power, this range, this frequency, it seems a bit too much. Buzzing. However, there was no room for them to sigh too much. Starting with the 3 Grizzly tanks, the following Grizzly tanks had already successfully broken through. Brothers, fire! Chen Tong shouted, and the 4 teams of Eagle Squad, Wolf Squad, Hound Squad, and Firefox Squad all sprayed out a huge amount of fire snakes in an instant, which was also mixed with a large number of tank shells. The firepower burst out in an instant. Simply shocking. Wang Ling is particularly unique among them. When the Grizzly tanks are gathered together, the range of his electric connection is wider. He can cover 5 or 6 tanks in one breath. As a result, after one launch, 5 or 6 Grizzly tanks are following him quickly. Lose blood. Coupled with the firepower of other tanks and soldiers, these nearly 20 Grizzly tanks did not last long before they were all annihilated. However, the quartet only lost a few conscripts, and 3 more were destroyed. Half-health Rhino tank. There are a lot of these Grizzly tanks, but when Wang Ling and his troops gather together, the number is even greater, not to mention there are many 3-star elites among them. How can these nearly 20 tanks fight in a head-to-head encounter? Can you beat them? Moreover, these tanks were not in vain. After successfully annihilating them, many people in the army were promoted to the 3-star elite level. Even the ungraded Apocalypse tank in the Eagle team was promoted to a 1-star veteran. It is estimated that if this kind of impact occurs a few more times, this Apocalypse tank will be enough to be promoted to the elite level. The Grizzly tank group of the 3rd Speed Echelon was destroyed, which also gave the troops in all directions a shot in the arm. Everyone was full of confidence, excited in their hearts, and full of fighting spirit. However, the enemy's attack is not over yet. 3 light tanks from the 4th Speed Echelon are also on their way. Although the light prism tank is too slow, it is still faster than the infantry after all, and it is not too far away from the quartet's troops now. The range of this light prism tank is even further than that of Wang Ling now, and its attack is also connected in nature, which is very lethal to infantry. Once they are allowed to get close, Heavy casualties will probably occur among the troops from all directions. Chen Tong visited Wang Ling before and gained a lot. He also learned about the characteristics of the light prism tank from Wang Ling's mouth, but he also knew its weaknesses. When he observed the light prism tank approaching, he did not hesitate and waved his hand. Under his command, a one-star apocalypse tank rushed out alone. Looking at this posture, it was obvious that it was going to intercept the 3 light prism tanks halfway. Doing this was naturally suspected of being a grab for battle glory, but Wang Ling just glanced at him lightly and didn't say anything more. If this apocalypse tank can be promoted to the 3-star elite level, it will undoubtedly be good news for the coalition forces. What's more, what Wang Ling cares about most now is not the 3 apocalypse tanks, but the huge group of soldiers in the last speed echelon of the pursuing army. These are already made points. Of course, the individual points for knocking down buildings and destroying tanks are more than killing soldiers, but the basic number of soldiers is much larger than that of tanks and buildings, and they are much easier to annihilate. In this red alert world, this is the easiest bulk point to obtain. However, after looking at the troops around him, Wang Ling was a little dissatisfied. They were probably going to steal a lot of points from him. This was not a situation Wang Ling wanted to see. He even used radio to temporarily give orders to the 2 Samsung anti-aircraft crawlers that had already transported the seriously injured to the base, and mobilized them here. When it comes to killing soldiers, this 3-star anti-aircraft tracked vehicle is the most powerful. There is no such thing as points for other 3-party troops. Seeing this anti-aircraft crawler vehicle, they didn't know that Wang Ling was trying to grab points. They just thought it was to better target the soldiers who followed, so they didn't pay much attention. After the tracked vehicle arrived, the 1-star apocalypse tank temporarily dispatched by Chen Tong finally came into contact with the light prism tank. It was not polite. It fired 2 cannons at the front, directly hitting the light prism tank at the front. Beaten to residual blood. The light prism tank was suddenly disturbed while advancing, and the light prism tank was also attracted by it. The launcher was turned around, and a light prism ray was directed at the apocalypse tank. This light tank is terrifyingly lethal to infantry, but for tanks, when the number does not reach a certain level, it is somewhat powerless, let alone a 1-star apocalypse tank. The health bar above his head only dropped slightly, but the apocalypse tank's follow-up attack had already landed, destroying the prism tank. Subsequently, the 2nd and 3rd light prism tanks were also destroyed by him. But it's a pity that the apocalypse tank needs more than a little bit of experience to be promoted to a 3-star elite. It destroyed 3 light tanks in a row, but it didn't show any signs of upgrading. Chen Tong had no choice but to recruit him back. On the way back, Chen Tong also looked at the 2 3-star apocalypse tanks in the Wolf Squad with a complicated expression. From these 2 apocalypse tanks, he could also see how many battles the Wolf Squad had experienced. Although the Wolf team deserved this, he still felt a little envious in his heart. After the apocalypse tanks returned to their positions and the quartet troops were on alert for a while, the last major Allied pursuit force finally arrived at this place. Wang Ling was still the first to fire. The infantry group was too dense. His powerful electromagnetic current fell and instantly enveloped 10 Allied soldiers with electricity. The interconnected arcs revealed brilliance, but beyond the brilliance, however, it also hid a fatal danger. The health bars above the heads of all the Allied soldiers who were enveloped were reduced by nearly half in an instant. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 189. This gorgeous electromagnetic current, with its elegant yet arrogant arc, unceremoniously raged through the group of Allied soldiers. The interconnected currents actually showed an irregular pattern due to the arrangement of the soldiers. Pentagram shape. Around them, Chen Tong and the others glanced at the arc of the five-pointed star, and their eyelids couldn't help but twitch. Although it was not the first time they had seen it, they were still a little surprised when they saw the electric range of this electromagnetic current. Contrary to their amazement, the Allied soldiers who were attacked were suddenly swept away by an electromagnetic current coming from a distance. These 10 soldiers immediately fell to the ground with serious injuries on their bodies. But they still gritted their teeth and crawled on the ground to alleviate the pain caused by the electric shock. However, just as this electromagnetic current ended, and before they could take a breath, the second electromagnetic current followed closely, and another continuous electromagnetic bombardment hit their bodies, instantly injuring them seriously. There is only a faint trace of the health bar left. Wang Ling obviously did not intend to leave this trace of blood to them. The third electromagnetic current was immediately launched, and the 10 seriously injured Allied soldiers died in an instant due to repeated exposure to strong current. 3 consecutive electromagnetic attacks wiped out 10 Allied soldiers. The soldiers around were amazed at this efficiency of clearing troops. However, this was not over yet. After wiping out one round of Allied soldiers, Wang Ling immediately started the second round of offensive. 2 electromagnetic flows went down in succession. The 10 Allied soldiers in this second round also ended up the result of a serious injury with residual blood. During the period when Wang Ling took action, the large Allied pursuing troops did not wait to be beaten. They were advancing all the time. Before the second round of Allied soldiers was terminated, this large number of Allied troops were finally rushed into the fire range of the 4 forces. Fire! Hit me! Destroy them! The 3 captains shouted almost at the same time. Together with the wolf squad, the troops from all directions immediately shot away the dense fire snakes. The posture was like a hail of bullets. Wang Ling also took the opportunity to launch a third electromagnetic current. After killing the 10 seriously injured Allied soldiers, he continued the third round of offensive. The powerful and brilliant electromagnetic attack once again enveloped the 10 Allied soldiers, quickly destroying the enemy. He is fast, but there are others who are not slower than him. For example, the 2 3-star anti-aircraft tracked vehicles continuously fire artillery shells that are extremely lethal to infantry. Under the splash damage, a large number of Allied soldiers are often eliminated. However, to be shocking, it has to be the 3 Apocalypse tanks, which can fire 4 explosive shells each time. The barrels are constantly swinging rapidly, and the 4 shells are scattered. Each round of bombing has 4 allies. The army soldiers were eliminated, and the combined speed of the 3 vehicles was even faster than Wang Ling and the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. As for the other infantry, they also gritted their teeth and fired with all their might. The rattling gunshots, superimposed together, were no less powerful than the Apocalypse tank. After receiving a powerful attack, the group of Allied soldiers refused to admit defeat. After entering its fire range, they immediately deployed and started fighting with the troops from all directions. The firepower of these troops of about 100 or so people after deployment cannot be underestimated. Even if they were hit head-on, the temporary burst of firepower caused the troops in all directions to suffer some hardships. Many mobilization soldiers died here. Under the dense fire snakes, there were more conscripts at the rear to fill their positions. Even the Rhino tanks of the Eagle Squad and the Firefox Squad were targeted by the concentrated fire, destroying 2 of them. The fierce battle between the 2 sides was extremely fierce. The thundering sound of the firefight could be heard clearly within a radius of several thousand meters. The smoke rising into the sky almost non-stop. This earth that was already in a mess was even more devastated and shivering, with gunpowder and artillery fire everywhere. Naturally, it was intense, but the teams from all 4 parties were already veterans on the battlefield. There were many 3-star elites, and the overall number of soldiers was also extremely impressive. There were also several big killers and tracked vehicles stationed there, and the Allied forces were tracking them. Although the number of troops is also large, in terms of soldier level and composition, they are simply not comparable to the quartet troops. As a result, this fierce battle lasted for a short time, and the Allied forces already suffered heavy casualties. Looking at the electronic map, it can be found that the light spots represented by this group of Allied forces are like snow meeting the scorching Sunday same, disappearing quickly. Boom boom. Boom boom. Ta-da-da ta-da-da. Seeing the significant reduction in the number of Allied troops, the soldiers of the quartet felt like they had been given a shot in the arm. At that moment, they desperately increased their firepower output. The already embarrassed Allied troops were in a company. After resisting for a period of time, as the last shell of the Apocalypse tank fell, it was finally cleaned up. At this point, the three-party Allied bases' encirclement and suppression plan completely collapsed. After the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad pushed through an entire Allied base, they finally safely returned to the coalition's sphere of influence. As a result, I don't know how angry the high-ranking officials of the Allied forces were. However, no matter how angry they were, Wang Ling and his troops didn't care at all. After the heated battle just now, these soldiers still seemed to have a strong and fiery fighting spirit, waiting for the bones of the Allied soldiers to gradually disappear. Finally, this group of people returned to normal, and immediately everyone was beaming with joy. Haha, so happy, so happy. Tisk tisk, the battle ended a bit quickly. So many Allied soldiers are all dead. No. I was scared when I saw our firepower just now. When the Allied soldiers catch up with us, they will be damned for 8 lifetimes. Due to the aftermath of the war, this group of soldiers recalled the battle just now. The powerful fire suppression made them feel intoxicated, as if they were floating into the sky one by one. Although this kind of conceited mentality is not advisable, it doesn't matter if you feel proud occasionally. Wang Ling and the other 3 captains just smiled and did not reprimand them. Wang Ling even raised the electromagnetic device in his right hand, and its emission port flickered with powerful energy, which made Wang Ling feel intoxicated. Wang Ling had experienced the 7-star ace soldier before when he was a conscript, but due to the restrictions on the types of soldiers, the feeling at that time was far from as enjoyable as it is now. If the 7 stars are like this, how strong will the magnetic blast infantry of the 10-star soldier king be? Will he also get corresponding weapons in reality? After this question came to mind, Wang Ling couldn't help but laugh. He was looking forward to that scene. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 190. From the 7-star ace to the 10-star soldier king, although it requires a lot of experience to advance, Wang Ling also defeated a large number of enemy troops when he defended and retreated, and accumulated a lot of experience. He wants to advance to the 10-star soldier king. It won't be long. At this point, Wang Ling inevitably began to think about it. After the magnetic blast infantry has been promoted to the top level, it is time to experience other arms. Maybe other arms cannot be as powerful as the magnetic blast infantry, but as a player, Wang Ling also really wanted to give it a try. Naturally, a large number of points are needed to switch arms and accept the arms experience book. Thinking of this, Wang Ling has very high expectations for this battlefield and the various wars that are about to break out. It is ridiculous to say that when he first came into contact with the different dimensional system, Wang Ling was not optimistic about the system and just had a playful mentality. Although he later changed his mind, he was frustrated because of the duality of the system. As for now, after tasting the sweetness, I am in such high spirits again. On the modern internet, there is a joke called the law of true fragrance. This sentence and this law are perfect for Wang Ling. After thinking about the electromagnetic launch device, Wang Ling finally came to his senses. He put down his hands and took a look at the devastated battlefield. The pitted ground and the smell of gunpowder in the air all indicated that this place had just experienced a war. What a massive battle! In the end of this battle, the quartet of the coalition won the victory, and it was a complete victory. The total loss before and after was less than 20 mobilization soldiers plus 2 Rhino tanks. Among the remaining personnel, the number of wounded soldiers was certainly quite a few, but as long as there is no death, you can always use the self-healing ability of the hospital or the 3-star elite to recover as before. The Allies must have been very angry about this battle, but after observing the electronic map, after the battle here, the remaining 3 Allied bases did not send any more troops. After all, the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad had already arrived. The coalition's territory was beyond their reach and they could no longer launch encirclement and suppression campaigns. This large-scale battle of raid and annihilation finally came to an end. At this time, the sky was getting brighter. At the end of the line of sight, outside the horizon, the fiery sun was slowly emerging. This sunrise scene, the dawn after darkness, seemed to be cheering for the victory of the Wolf team and the Hound team. Inspiring. Looking up and looking at the soft light of the first day, Wang Ling couldn't help but sigh. A whole night has passed since the attack on the Allied base. This night was really uneventful, but in the end, looking back, it was quite meaningful. The 4 Allied bases and the 2 coalition bases originally faced each other. Although they attacked each other from time to time, they maintained a balance with each other. But now, in this battle, one of the Allied bases was destroyed, and the balance was broken. The remaining 3 Allied bases will not be easy in the future. Ha ha ha, you chased us all night, but in the end you didn't do anything to us. Instead, you were killed. Isn't it embarrassing? Many soldiers were still excited, and Sun Chiming also started to sarcastically. However, Wang Ling was somewhat disapproving of his sarcasm. Don't be so proud. If Captain Chen and Captain Dong hadn't arrived in time to support us, our situation would still not be optimistic. That's true, old Dong, and Captain Chen, thank you. Sun Chiming was cheerful and gave another military salute to the two of them. Chen Tong smiled slightly and didn't take it seriously. We are both members of the coalition forces, so it is our duty to support them. However, Dongming acted cunningly. Hey, why are you thanking me? How can I be embarrassed to ask for reward after you thank me? Get out. Sun Chiming's face darkened, but the two men's teasing made Wang Ling and many soldiers present laugh. After laughing, Wang Ling took a long breath and said, no matter what, thank you. Now that the battle is over, let's hurry up and return to the base. Only when we return to the base can we be considered relatively safe, and after the battle, we all need some rest. Captain Wang is right. Damn, I was chased all night, and I didn't sleep a wink all night. I'm exhausted. Go back quickly, Sun Chiming also urged, and after finishing speaking, he even reminded, Captain Wang, don't forget, after the war is over, I still owe you a glass of wine. Haha, okay, I won't come back until I'm drunk. Wang Ling smiled happily. After the quartet troops and the 2 coalition bases said goodbye to each other, they finally made their way back. Even though they didn't sleep a wink all night, after fighting continuously and being tracked for a long time, the current Wolf team, including Wang Ling, didn't feel sleepy at all and were still in a state of excitement. However, after running for such a long time, the soldiers were exhausted. On the way back, the troops no longer rushed around in a hurry. They retreated leisurely, talking and laughing with the Eagle team until the afternoon of that day. The 2 teams rushed back to the base. Although Wang Ling once had outstanding military exploits, he was still new to this battlefield. Even after defeating Chen Tong, many established teams were not interested in him. But in this battle, Wang Ling also showed his reputation. All the troops in the base did not dare to take a look at Wang Ling, and they looked very respectful. All the soldiers they met along the way he solemnly performed a military salute. And Wang Ling didn't show any signs of it. He would solemnly return the salute to every military salute. he had received too many military salutes along the way. After some twists and turns, he finally returned to the Wolf team's station smoothly. The stationing points of the Eagle Squad and the Wolf Squad were not smooth sailing, but Chen Tong let the rest of the Eagle Squad return alone, but he personally accompanied the Wolf Squad and Wang Ling to the Wolf Squad station. After arriving at the destination, Chen Tongke said with a smile, "I have been calling you Captain Wang, but you are a bit unfamiliar. If you don't mind, I will call you by your name directly." "Wang Ling, congratulations. After this battle, you are here. The reputation of the base has completely improved, and the treatment is also different, and the standards are simply higher than mine." Wang Ling also laughed. "To be honest, it's quite troublesome to see someone perform a military salute, and I'm not used to it." Hey, I'm complimenting you, you're still raising your tail." Chen Tong gave him a look of disdain, but looking at the smile at the corner of his mouth, it was clear that he was just joking. For Chen Tong, who was previously arrogant, to make such a joke, it can be seen that in Chen Tong's heart, he has truly recognized Wang Ling and put him on the same level.